It's me again, Soul Dancer the White Dragon. I just felt the need, the urge to do this now. So I'm going to being as real can get. I have always resented and hated my mother. Because when I remember, and this is what created every goddamn thing in my adult life, raped by a cousin of hers at 3 years old anally. She was 23 at the time. And even my Jungian psychologist asked, but how could she not have known? I mean, with all the blood and whatnot and whatnot. Notice the fruits, the young fruits on the papaya tree. And then it continued where the man that she had other children for, when, how old was I? Perhaps 7, 4? He raped me when, I don't know, somewhere between 10 and 12. She was away at the time in Grenada. When she returned, I was a totally different human being. I found the courage to tell her this is from a child who was very quiet. This child, me, I was a bookworm. I didn't speak much. I told him, I told him that I was going to tell her on her return. When the house was empty, I told her. Her reaction was violent, a violent rejection. I took that, this child, not even an adolescent, took that as a rejection of herself. I had already been working on striving to get her love, and that just killed me. Now, she knew that something had happened. If it's one thing, she's a powerful intuitive, but that she could not accept. She totally rejected. They broke up perhaps a year or year and a half later, and he left the house and left us all and left her in the shit. And yet, that continued because I became a screaming virago. I was in a rage all the time. I mean all the time, in addition to the responsibilities that I now had of taking care of my siblings, her children, and myself, and the house, and going to school. That continued because something is not right with her up here. That's been obvious to me for decades now. She was still looking for a man to take care of her. The men that she attracted actually made advances to me, the adolescent and young teen, in her presence. And she, I remember one time, was just smiling as if this was absolutely normal, because these mofos probably told her some shit like, I like your daughter. That is the bullshit that these pedophiles and abusers push here. And of course, they read her character perfectly. Someone of them would give her a little, she was a fantastic cook. They would probably give her some tawdry trinket, and she would treasure that as if it was something. So I experienced all of those years, and I went through the rage, the hate. I used to talk to my youngest brother about this because he was the youngest and I was the oldest. And I discovered, because by 21 I had left. I bought my house at 21, and that was it. I was gone. Only to discover years later that she was responsible because of her carelessness, she doesn't learn. She doesn't learn. Exactly like the other sister who is here, they don't learn. They don't learn at all. And consequently, her son, the youngest, was raped by a man who was supposedly looking after, watching over the young children in the play yard. He was very well known to do that. His name was Jack, I believe. It's my brother who related this to me. He never said a word when I was in the country. But I left 7 years later, and he was left to suffer. I knew nothing about this. So there I was now, trying to explain her to him in his pain, in his agony. And in addition to which, you see, when children are subjected to sexual advances, when they have sexual experience, let me make that even clearer, before their minds and their bodies are ready, it is devastating, because then they don't know who they are. They did not go through the process. And after that, apparently, this is what she told me in a weird comment that I didn't understand before I left the country. And then he told me in explicit detail afterwards. There was a family not far from us where the father was a pedophile. And I don't know what, and the man only had sons. So I can just imagine what took place in that house. The sons used to bring him, because he was my brother I'm talking about, this young, fragile, innocent, vulnerable, and already broken. He was barely a teenager. They used to take him into that house on a regular basis and rape him. He decided that years later that he was a homosexual because he only liked men, and this is what I meant. When a child talks about sex before their teens, it is because someone is already abusing them. When children have sexual language as children, it means that someone is already sexually abusing them. When children demonstrate a particular persona, sexual behavior, it is because someone is already abusing them. Parents don't like to know this. They pretend that it doesn't exist and they blame the child. And this is what happened to my brother, because he told me that she used to tell him to go down on his knees and pray and beg God not to become a homosexual and not to be. This is the bullshit. So I hated with a passion this woman. I hated this woman with all my guts. My brother used to be, he left the country with the aid of his father, who was living in California, got his papers from green card to citizenship. At least the man did one thing right, because he was never there. At least he did one thing right. But the damage has already been done. And my youngest brother, he's 10 years younger than I, is now a diagnosed schizophrenic. He must be on medication for the rest of his life. Now, he used to call me when I lived in Switzerland, and he would talk to me and pour out his pain and his anguish for hours. For hours. Sometimes from 3 in the morning until 7, and I would just get ready afterwards and go to work. Because I like to go into work early by 8 and leave by 3. And this is what just revved up the hate against this woman. Because I understood everything intellectually by now, it is this hate and this resentment that caused my psyche crash in my late 40s. Suicidal depression. I wish for him that it was that. But he is going to be experiencing these things as a schizophrenic, and he is still trying to gain her love. She didn't have any to give because she was still looking for others to love her. And because she was brought up in a particular way, in a particular household in Grenada, this is what she learned, that the men are there to take care of you, and because there is something not right up here with her, she's always had a very childlike demeanor, and thinking is very difficult for her. It doesn't mean that she's stupid. So I grew up and nurtured this hate and resentment and rage, just pure rage, when I think of my brother. Oh my God. But he turned it around, and he would do everything, and still is, to try to get her to love him. She doesn't see that. She cannot see it, because if she would see it, then she would have to admit her part in it, and she cannot. Which was part of the problem when I returned to the country after losing after becoming bankrupt, and I had nowhere to go. I spent all my money and the rest was just taken away, but I was responsible. So I had to come back here. I couldn't live in Switzerland, France, or anywhere else. And I ended up homeless. Those 3.5 years in the homeless shelter broke me wide open, forced me to stand up for who I was, being murdered, being almost murdered twice, and having nobody to depend on but myself and my guys, and clearly I had them. But I had to face down this man who came to kill me with his 12-inch blade. I will never forget it. And that is what made me stand up, back to the wall. And I always say, when I looked at this mofo, I really prefer to use the correct word, but I really am working on stopping cursing. Because eventually, hopefully by then I'm off Facebook, eventually, a few months down the line, the bots are going to start circulating about language and this hypocritical bullshit, and they're probably going to block me again, or pull all my posts with the F words in it. We're moving right along. And it is because of this man who was about to kill me, because I blew him off, and that terror that I'd been living in had been going on for a year. And finally, I had had enough. And I said, go ahead, kill me. Just make sure I am dead. Because if not, I am going to get you. Finger pointing at him like this. I did get him. But you know what? When I heard that he was dying from HIV, from AIDS, related complications, and he did tell me, he told me that I broke him. I backed him into a corner from which there was no return. I forgave him on his deathbed. This man, this massive brute, this bully, this avowed murderer, because he used to take on contracts to kill people, I forgave him in tears. I got him, but I forgave him, because after I told him what I told him, I just saw his hand just drop like this with the blade, with the knife. He didn't know what to do. Now, I never thought of it like this, but obviously something was working in me, because if I could forgive that monster who said he loved me when I rejected his advances, but then I began following him, and I had a sort of platonic relationship with him because, stupid woman that I am, that I was, I genuinely wanted to help him when he came to me for help. Women always fall into this trap, and I did. But that was because I wanted to love someone. Now, I reported him to the police every time he abused me. We were not living together. But he was my protector because he had a strength. This was in the shelter. He had a strength that I had never, ever witnessed in a man. And I love strong men. Not the abuse. Strong men. Strong of will. Strong of mind. That sort of stuff. I still took him to the police every time he would slap me or whatever it is or chase me down. So, if I could forgive that, what about my mother? So obviously there was something working in me that kept bringing me back to this house where I do not recall having any happy memories. I came back once. I was forced to return here once. She looked at me in my face with her usual mean smile, and she directed the little boy, her grandson, her first grandson, to break my laptop in front of me. Of course, everyone assumed that I had done it. What was I going to do? Blame him? I didn't say a word. So that's the kind of thing that I grew up with, and the sister here is exactly the same. She's of the same ilk. Now I'm back the second time because of COVID and because she fell down. She has a twisted spine now. She has all sorts of ailments created by her. I do believe that the majority of our illnesses are created by us. This is to blame. She is racked with guilt that she cannot express. Because I'm a people observer, I know people and I understand why they do what they do. She was my very first client, quote unquote. So now that I'm back here, the anger and resentment on my time and the constantly calling me for this, that, etc. I have to say, I'm not a maid. I'm here to assist you and support you. And then I end up supporting and lifting the entire fucking house. See, the F word slipped out. Those things take too much of my time, and I used to say that until I realized, no, let me draw some stronger boundaries, and it's just no. But what then happened was something started to happen. And I began to accept from speaking to Penny, in particular, Penny Bellwhite, and others, that yes, she has her own pain, which she cannot express. And because of that, it has created these things within her. And she is honestly, that I can see and say, doing her best with who she is, because she cannot verbalize. She cannot speak. She had the experiences, the trauma that she cannot share. And you know what I realize now? I saw it this morning, and for the past few days, you see how long it took? 6 months. But clearly I had been on a journey, because once I released the self-anger, once I released the judgment, once I began to love who I am, that's where it started. Once I began to love who I am and to love myself to the nth limit, every time I see myself in a mirror, when I see myself on video, and I always review my videos because I don't always remember what I say, because a lot of channeling comes in, and I don't notice, because as Penny told me, I'm a natural channel. I don't notice. So what happened was, as I said, once I realized and embraced that I love myself so much, I love myself so much, I love who I am. This is the journey that I have been on for so long. If I can love myself so much, I cannot not love her. I see the others as they are. I understand why they do what they do. It does not mean that I'm not going to blast their asses. Because when something is not acceptable to me, I say it and I leave it right there. I'm not picking it up, I'm not carrying it, I'm not nurturing that crap and then keeping it here. And then I would do some energy work on myself to clear my psyche. So I come back again to say, because of this self-love and self-appreciation, I have come to love and appreciate my mother and what she brings to the table. And not only that, I know that we had a contract. This contract is now null and void. I have gotten rid of the contract. I burned the contracts in addition to the soul contracts with all the other individuals in here. And I have let them all go. What I am now doing is just sending them love, compassion with the Ho'oponopono prayer. That is all I can do for them. The beautiful part is my mother, when I see her, as she diminishes now, because I think I have managed to persuade her that all she has to do when she's ready to make the transition is go to sleep and not wake up. Because death is just another journey, you know. When you go home, that's just another journey. It's just another part of our journey. After this, I have to go and hug her. I tell her I love her often, and I do mean it. I never say anything I don't mean. And I love and appreciate the way she is and how she, as part of the contract, forced me to stand in my power. That's what it did. It forced me to stand in my power. It broke me, everything she did broke me wide open to see and appreciate who I really am. The papaya tree in the background, let's see, can you see the fruits? Yeah, they are the fruits. They are the fruits. Papaya trees, as I keep saying, and there's something special and magical here. Papaya trees mean that your ancestors are looking down on you. And all of my ancestors are now here. I have one last job to do, and that is clean up the female line of the bullying males, the negative energy males that have accompanied them through time, from lifetime to lifetime. There is one here, my sister's son, and he is, because I didn't understand what was going on, this is part of my journey, and he, this 40 years old, acts like 14. He's mean, he's a compulsive liar, he's a thief, destructive as you would not believe, and his mother treats him as if he is 14 years old, and the only thing she doesn't do is smooth his head and take him in her arms. But everything she does is the epitome of that. And because I do not and will not and will never and have never tolerated abusive men, that is what my stay in the shelter was meant to help me with, to see it clearly and to say no. Because I thought, when I looked at this little shit, at first it used to hurt. Why are you stealing my things? Why are you destroying my property? Why are you going into my bag to literally find things to destroy? And all of that other sort of stuff. Then I realized, once I discarded the hurt, that this went all the way back to childhood, when I was not allowed to have anything. This is what the message, not what literally what it was. This is the message that the child received when my siblings would go into my things, as I the eldest by 5 or 6 years. I don't remember now. I think it's 6 maybe. And they would just take my things, and she used to say, she told me twice or 3 times, and that's the message I got: I just want peace, let them take what they want. So once I understood where that rage and hurt and helplessness that I could not express as a child, because I was not expressive at all, I was very biddable until that cataclysmic event of sexual abuse. And then I changed. So once I saw that, no, I would be enraged, violently angry, say things to just cut. But then the problem was, and this is the journey I'm on, but then the problem was that attracted the same kind of anger, even though he was the, not was, even though he, but was the abuser. So once I dealt with that and I cut that, then I decided, okay, after discussion with a good friend of mine, I said, all right. She suggested the Ho'opono prayer, Ho'oponopono. And once I began using that, because the effect, I cut him off totally. Because you see, abuse, I will never tolerate from anybody. If I will not tolerate it from my mother, in her case it was verbal, I'm not tolerating it from my sister, because she is it's normal for her as well. She's very self-centered, just like her son. And this is what this is the kind of life he wants to live. And this is his preferred existence, which is why he chose the female that he did, who is just as abusive, but in her case she's manipulative. She's just a compulsive liar as he is. The only sad thing is that they have a child. Why did the child choose this couple to have this experience as parents? I have no input, because it is obvious what is going on, and it is the same type of bullying. Because you see, when a child has to cry because he is hungry, that child has already learned that crying is his only defense to get what he wants. Because his lout of a father prefers to, what do you call it? Prefers social media. That's his only connection with reality. And we know what social media is. So these are the individuals that I am treating with now. And my part in it is to negate that negative male energy and free and lift the female line to where it is supposed to be, going back all generations. That is almost at its natural conclusion, because this young man does not even create a blip on my radar anymore. And I am very grateful for that, because you see, with me, this is why also I said that I am not a nice person, because when I get to a certain point, you're dead. There will be no movement, there will be no give, there will be nothing at all. You exist, good for you. You have no self-respect, there is none to get from me. My anger, and just to say before I sign off, my anger and rage was because I was constantly disrespected, because I had expectations, because I knew how he grew up. But then I saw how he grew up when he left Trinidad and Tobago. And that is where the weakness that is inherent in him blossomed, because clearly he hung out with the niggers who lack respect for women, and because he is not an adult, and because he was his weakness was nurtured by his mother, that's the result. Lack of responsibility, no self-respect. And when I see how he disrespects her and she does nothing about it to cut it, I realize that that is the pattern. But they have a contract, because they, in a previous life, I don't know if it's this one, they were siblings and they decided to return together. They have a contract to complete, but that is their business and that is their concern. So once I dealt with the fact that I did not respect myself enough and my expectations would never be fulfilled, that disappeared as well. So I no longer felt hurt by the things that he did. And now, okay, you're a human being. The only innocent here is the little child who decided to be born to these two human beings to experience something. And I have no say, because when I used to say and point out things about the child, it would be ignored. There would be a silent, non-verbal, violent reaction. And it was always the child who would be blamed. And it would always be the child who would suffer. In addition to which, his sneaking around to do things, damage my property or whatever belonged to me, out of sight, because this is what bullies do. Bullies are cowards. I just have to leave that and return their energy to them. And I do that all the time, because I am, just like Abraham Hicks says, I am not taking in anyone's energy. I return it to them healed and transformed, and I take mine back healed and transformed, and I integrate it with grace and ease. This is what we all have to do, and that is how my journey is progressing right now. It is almost at the end. The contract has been annulled, all of the contracts destroyed with all of these individuals. You should have seen those contracts. And I am cleaning up the female line. When it's done, I'm gone, and it's soon to be completed. So beautiful souls, I really needed to share that journey of love for my mother and with my mother. Now I'm just gonna go give her a hug, and I love you. Ciao.